hột gà nướng, hột vịt lộn, hột vịt sữa, trứng cút lộn, ớt xào đây.
This is an extra special episode at the end of season 7 of 7 Million Bikes, a Vietnam podcast. I'm not going to be your host today. Each month, 7 Million Bikes is now hosting a networking event for creatives and creators looking to meet like-minded people and share ideas. These events have been online so far, so we've been able to welcome people from all over the world, but unfortunately for those that are outside of Saigon, these will take place in Saigon soon, hopefully. Our second event was hosted by Conor Kelly, who is the founder and host of the Comeback podcast. In this presentation, Conor will explain the foundations of the comeback, how to take the hardest step in actually starting a podcast, and why podcasting is extremely valuable for purpose and connection. The show's slogan, "The Comeback Beats the Setback," aims to shed light on comeback stories and how guests have triumphed over adversities faced in their lives. Based in Saigon, this podcast now has over 250 interviews from people all over the world, covering themes such as expat life, creative projects, and mental health awareness. At the end of this presentation, there is a question and answer session, so please make sure you stay tuned for that. There may be some questions that you wanted to ask, and hopefully someone else will ask them and you can hear their answers. If you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, then get in touch with 7 Million Bikes. We now offer podcast production services, and we can help you get your podcast started, whether it's just for a hobby or for your business. We've now started producing podcasts for a number of different businesses. So if you are interested in starting your own podcast, get in touch with me. The link is in the show notes, and we can talk more about how we can help you do that. Enjoy this presentation by Conor Kelly, Podcasting for Purpose and Connection.
Obviously, we all have a collective interest in podcasting. Some do it ourselves, some are considering. So hopefully this presentation will give you some kind of insight into why it's valuable, why it's key for purpose, and also for connection. And I was very comfortable writing and typing behind the screen, but not with a microphone, not getting my voice out there. I thought that was too much. That was an obstacle that I would have to overcome. So when I was doing the blog, I realized that if I'd made this into a podcast, I could cut out all of the effort. But again, sometimes it can be just a fun, let's do a pod, see where we go type setup. Like, I still try to embrace the spontaneity. I think that it should be fun. Being too rigid might take away the initial reason why we started podcasting. I am getting better now at realizing that I should just be present with this guest. I've read the books on, say, present moment, etc. You have to be present with the guest, listen to what they're saying, direct the conversation in that manner, and really pay them due attention. It's very important, actually, for the flow of the conversation. That's why I put it number 1. And I guess number 2 is be authentic. I feel it's a huge obstacle for podcasts. It's huge. It's going on Spotify. People will hear my voice. It might get shared. I have to promote it, etc. And then once I published it, all of that went. And now it feels very normal, where I remember when I did my first ever podcast, I was interviewed and I put it on Facebook. People were, "Oh my God, you did a podcast." And I thought, yeah, I actually did a podcast.
Thank you for listening to Season 7, 7 Million Bikes, a Vietnam podcast. I'm your host, Neil Mackay. Become a member of the 7 Million Bikes community and you'll get free tickets to our events, free 7 Million Bikes face masks, episodes a day early, behind-the-scenes content, and invites to special events for community members. The link is in the show description, so check it out and join today. Thank you so much to our existing community members. We look forward to seeing you again soon. This season, we've gifted sponsorship of a Vietnam podcast to 2 amazing charities close to our hearts: the Blue Dragon Children's Foundation in the north and Saigon Children's Charity in the south. Please check out the links in the description to learn more about these amazing organisations and donate if you can. Enjoy the episode and thanks for listening. Thank you very much, everyone. Conor from the Comeback podcast is your host tonight. I'll hand you over to him.
Excellent. Well, firstly, thank you to everyone who has came today. Obviously, we all have a collective interest in podcasting. Some do it ourselves, some are considering. So hopefully this presentation will give you some kind of insight into why it's valuable, why it's key for purpose, and also for connection. What I will do briefly, and I will not give you the full history, do not worry. I will just explain really where comeback came from, why I decided to do it, and why it took me a long time to actually execute. It was an idea for a long time, but only, as I mentioned earlier, January, where it actually came to something. So the origins were when I actually arrived in Vietnam. And I came here, just turned 22, and realized that I should be doing something in my 20s. I should be really trying to get out there, actually make a name, make a career, get something tangible. And my degree was in journalism, so I suppose it's the obvious step, really, to get involved in that sort of realm. Yet, to begin with, I didn't really know how to start. I had a whole list of reasons why I couldn't. For example, I wasn't the greatest talker. I didn't have contacts. I didn't work that hard at university, so I wasn't that versed with the journalism world. However, I thought I'd just go for it. So I started a blog in a very standard format, such as, hey, this is my blog, come back. I'll share some stories that I've heard, books or films or TV, or from people that I know, or even my own personal experiences about primarily comeback from adversity. Now, I called it comeback because I did want to shed light on that comeback aspect, but also my name is Conor Kelly. So CK as the final two words, I thought I could make that, the personal point, I guess, try to make it mine in some capacity. So to begin with, at the very start, and this is towards the end of 2019, I just write about things that interested me or things that I think would help other people, such as me talking about my own experiences with severe depression, etc. I thought some people would benefit from that, and I would also benefit from the cathartic feel it would give me. And I read a lot of books, I picked up a lot of tips, and I thought by putting this down on pen and paper, it could go somewhere. Now, right now, it's only a blog, and it's just an Instagram, and I think I had about 7 or 8 average reads an article, 2 of which would be my parents. So that was the first week. Then it would build up to 50, then 100, then 200. And I thought, right, okay, this needs to go somewhere else. I just don't know where. With that, I then brought it into a blog and interview form. Because I had a journalist background, voice break, whoops, forgive me. I was aware how to interview people to a degree, how to write it down, and I was very comfortable writing and typing behind the screen, but not with a microphone, not getting my voice out there. I thought that was too much. That was an obstacle that I would have to overcome. So when I was doing the blog, I realized that if I'd made this into a podcast, I could cut out all of the effort, shall we say, because I would interview someone via the phone. Then I would have to type it up, and then I'd have to send it to them to check, and they'd want it to be corrected, and they'd send it back. And it would be a 2-week process where I thought, if I do a podcast and I just get rid of all these stumbling blocks or limitations that aren't really there, then it will be so much easier. I can just do the podcast, release it, and also people would be more willing. I think if I said to people, do you want to be featured on my blog? People would say yes, but they wouldn't be that excited. But if you say a podcast, they think, okay, there's something to this. They probably watch Joe Rogan. They probably have listened to others. They probably think that, yeah, I can just talk about anything and have an opportunity to be listened to. So with that then, in January 2021, about the middle of the month, I started the podcast finally. I should have really included a picture of the studio I had, which was literally 2 chairs, a stool in my shed house. There was a cat running in constantly. There were motorbikes outside. But as I will explain later in the presentation, just starting it is often the most difficult period. And so as we see here, there are 264 guests as we currently speak. And towards the bottom left is Neil. I would have Trent on the wall, but we did not have a physical interview. However, these are a selection of the photos that happen towards the end of the interview. So that's how it all started. And I suppose I'll expand upon why I actually began this. And one thing that we all, or I believe most of us, have in common is that we came to Vietnam. We are foreigners and we came here for some kind of reason. Now, I will expand upon all these 3 points in the further slides, but everyone came here for a reason. Let's delve deeper into it and find out why. Because I felt my reason was very, I suppose, basic. It was literally, I need to get out of the UK. I fancy a change of scenery. I'm going to do a TEPL course. The first job offer I get with accommodation, I will take. It just so happened to be Vietnam back in 2019, and there we go. Well, I felt a lot of people would have better, cooler, more interesting reasons than that, so I wished to find them out. With that, they would have a reason for coming here, and that contains a story. And in the story, there is a lesson. So I've always been obsessed with learning, probably to an irritating degree. As a 6-7-year-old, I'd always ask questions to parents, teachers, peers, to the point where they would just say, Connor, shut up. So I duly obliged. But that was a trait of mine, I suppose, innate curiosity. And I realized the podcast platform is perfect for that. Almost I can turn, I guess maybe it can be a weakness because I could overthink, but curiosity is quite key for podcasting because you can obviously ask questions, get the conversation flowing. So I thought to try it. And what I will also expand on is everybody has their purpose, everybody has their why, and you can learn from that. So in the next 3 slides, I will expand. When I said that everybody came to Vietnam from different countries, my first company, all from, voice break again, not like I'm 24 or anything. My first company, they were from either England, South Africa, or Australia. And that's generally what I thought, the average sort of nationality was coming here. Yet, upon, I suppose, further reflection, whether I went to Boy Bien or started living in shared houses or worked at EMG where there is a huge variety, I noticed there were people from Kazakhstan, Lithuania, New Zealand, Bermuda, Singapore, Philippines, Japan. I thought, wow, with this, you have so many different cultures, so many different experiences, so many different perspectives that I would never usually be able to hear from. Why don't I try this as almost like an international podcast? And I interviewed a lady today from Germany, and I believe that is the 34th country. I counted fairly recently and thought, wow, this is a huge depth of people from all over the world to learn from. So with that, there's always going to be a different reason why they came, because whether the situation in Germany wasn't great for them, or South Africa, Australia, etc., it would still be an interesting insight. And then I look to actually what that reason is from the nationalities, and common themes would come up. There'd be business. People would notice that Vietnam is a great place to be for business right now. They would recognize the standard of living, how much it costs to come over here, set up, the target market, expats, locals. They could do something great here, something different to their home country. So that's why they came. Another common theme that's come up on the podcast and the range of interviews is, and I'm not sure the exact term, and I should, from some of them, Viet Qs. So they have some link to Vietnam, i.e. a parent or any other relative, and they perhaps lived here before, moved. And one interview I did recently was with a lady, not from Wing, who is the author of Third Culture Kids, and goes into real detail about how that third culture kid mindset really affects you growing up in later life, where, for example, she didn't know if she was French, whether she was Vietnamese or American. For example, Vietnamese at home or French at school. When she went to her French friend's house, they abided by different cultures. And as a result, their value system, this was not the people she interviewed, people I've interviewed, their value system is always quite obscured and they don't know where they actually belong. And I thought, why not explore that link? That would always come up when asking a question that I always do to begin. How did you come to Vietnam? And a common one is also somewhere in Southeast Asia. I'll say, why Vietnam? Somewhere in Southeast Asia. I wanted to come here, Vietnam offered, for example. All common stories that they would go backpacking for a year, go to Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. Vietnam would stand out, so they would come back to live. But with the general overview here, there are a range of stories, and to learn from them again is valuable in a podcast. You can always get tips of perhaps where to move in the future. I want to move to Melbourne in the future, and obviously, as we discussed just before recording, Neil and Trent have both lived there. So I can always pick up little bits from different people, different places that I can perhaps use for the future. And that is one benefit of the podcast. And then going back to the purpose aspect, everybody has their why, everybody has their purpose. From my own experiences growing up, I often realized things weren't going well for me when I realized there is nothing I actually enjoy. And I think a lot of people who've been through that cycle of depression, etc., will probably pinpoint that as the key factor, that there is nothing that they enjoy. And we've seen the mental health statistics go up and up and up at an alarming rate the last 5 years. And I have realized from harsh experience in my own life and also from peers, friends, etc., that one of that is a lack of purpose, a lack of direction, not finding the joy in anything. So with the interviews I do, it's generally quite varied. But when starting your podcast, you can specify, for example, if you're in the creative realm, you get all these creatives. If you are a musician, like Jeremy at Soundscape Vietnam, you can interview people solely on music or generally in that target. If you're sporting, you can go into sport and talk to people from different sporting backgrounds. If you want to raise awareness for certain charity organizations, causes that you believe in, you can also go to that. I think the key message that I'm trying to summarize here is that everybody has their purpose. Everybody has something that keeps them going. And during this last 18 months or longer, actually, since Corona, we've been locked in our houses, not able to do anything. And that really does take its toll on you when you are literally deprived from things that you previously enjoyed, like your sport, like your activism, your art, etc. Obviously, you can adapt and you can find hobbies that you can partake in your bedroom, but it's not quite the same thing. And it did make me realize we all do need something. One of the guests I had, a chap called Philip McKernan, mentioned one of his practices. He works with, he's within the coaching sphere, so life coaching, etc. And he would say that one of the challenges he would set to his clients are to go away by themselves for a day and literally be by themselves. And they'll say, oh, I could do that. He says, yes, but you can't have radio, you can't have TV, you can't read a book, you can't listen to music, you can't have a phone. You literally have to be with you and your thoughts. And they can't do that. And 95% of people would really struggle with that because being alone with your thoughts is a very difficult experience. Hence why some of the things I mentioned here are necessary. So to delve into that person's mindset, that when you have a podcast with them, such as why do you love music? Why do you love art? Why do you pursue sport so avidly? You can really get more information out of them. And that, I suppose, brings me to why you should start. In Saigon especially, and I do want to stress actually, you can interview people from all around the world. You don't have to necessarily just do Saigon or just do Vietnam. That is great if you do. There are lots of people, and I will explain more about how you can find people, as I'm sure you're aware, in future slides. But the variety of people in this city and this country in particular is astonishing. As I've mentioned, Bermuda, Kazakhstan, France, Italy, Spain, the list goes on. And one of the things I've noticed with podcasting, I often think, okay, I've interviewed this person. I've had a connection. We've shared stories. We get on fairly well now. Some friendships, some acquaintances, some get on better than before. But I always think, if I didn't interview you, would I ever really connect with you? And I often think, probably not. If it was somebody who I've not got anything in common with, then there would be no path where we really connect properly. Maybe at work, we'd have small talk. How was your weekend? Great. Okay. How do you like Vietnamese food? It's lovely. Okay. Bye. But on a podcast, you can actually delve into their story and see things from a different perspective. One thing, and I don't want to dwell on this, but I will mention it later, is I find that nowadays it's very difficult for a lot of people to see things from another's point of view, where I've seen it via social media with this cancel culture rise, that if you say something that's different to somebody else, it can often be seen as an insult and cause disagreement, etc. Whereas here, you can really have some empathy. You can get into that other person's shoes and see things that you wouldn't normally see from your perspective, from your conditioning. And another great reason to start is to establish friendships and discuss hobbies with people that have similar interests and they're acquainted to that. I'll use an example. Excuse me. Where I'm from in the UK, the main topics is, I'll say football, the weather, drinking, and that's great to a point. But I was getting into, say, more meditation and self-help books, etc. And concepts that would probably be described in the UK as slightly wacky, maybe, if that's the word, such as hypnotherapy, law of attraction. And if I was to mention that in a pub, like, I'd get shut down, or someone would be like, right, okay, shut up. However, here in Saigon, there will be people from all over the world who will talk about this with me for hours on end. And it's not weird. It's just we have that connection. It'll actually fascinate when I go home, the things I'll be talking about. Will the people there recognize me discussing these topics because I feel like I'm learning every day? I don't know, but it is interesting in this podcast realm that you can do that. And the thing that makes podcasting different, if you were to say podcasting is just a conversation, you can do this anyway, especially if you know the person. I think there is something different. And the way I would describe it is that you can ask somebody a question and have a conversation that I can't think of many examples where you could have in real life. I think only if you were extremely drunk or it's 5 a.m. and the night's gone and you're having that deep chat in front of the stars. These are the only examples I can think of where this chat would happen. You know, if you walked up to someone in your office or in your social group at 11 a.m. and said, what's your life purpose? What are your core values? What's your most important lesson? What's your biggest trauma? And how did you learn from it? They'll look at you as if you're bizarre, or they will shut down that conversation. Yeah, if you ask it in a podcast, you know that there's something going on here. There's a goal to be reached. You're trying to get a connection. So it goes. And each time you will be surprised. Even if you did know the person beforehand, and often I don't, but when I do, they'll say something that I wouldn't have expected from them, such as the fact that before they go to do a certain activity that they love, i.e. sport, music, theatre, they will have a certain ritual to calm their anxiety. And I'll think, don't appear like you have anxiety, but because you've, I don't know, hidden it and then let it go in the podcast sphere, it's a different thing and it's surprising for me. So I think it's a unique connection opportunity. I don't think you can get it in many other mediums. Now, I might be wrong and I've got time to explore it, but podcasting for me is definitely brought out the side that I would always want to know. As I mentioned earlier, I'd always be that kid who would always constantly ask questions. I'd always want to know, really the core insights, but it's difficult to get that in the normal life. So podcasting is a great outlet for that, I'd strongly consider. And what do you need? Now, one thing that I thought stopped me, and it held me back hugely between 2019 and 20, was the mountain I created, where before I even started an episode, I thought I needed a huge fancy studio, sponsorship, a contact book full of people with public profile, all sorts of things. I thought I needed top editing software. I thought I needed a sound engineer. I thought I needed like a Jamie off Joe Rogan to Google things for me. I thought I needed everything. And then I realized the more I'm building this up, I will never actually do it because I'm acting as if I've done this 5 years. You're starting. And if you're starting, and I will discuss this more, it's fine to just have the basics. And the basics, which really surprised me, the phone and the laptop, they work. Now, of course, if you want to make it top quality, microphones, headphones, equipment, editing software, that is essential. But if you just want to start and you just want to get the ball rolling, which I think is the most difficult bit, then phone, laptop, a willingness to listen, a willingness to actually engage is all you really need. Aside from contacts, I found that the biggest surprise. I thought initially, who will actually come on a podcast if I asked them to? Like, surely maybe a handful of people, but it would be a real challenge. And 9 months in, that hasn't been an issue at all. If anything, I've kind of occasionally thought, fuck, how am I going to fit these people in? So it depends. But I'd say the main things are just, if you want to just start, phone and laptop is fine. Use the audio. And as I've shown you here is the wall of fame. And I'll give you a brief list. And I've only selected a handful of people because I couldn't go through everyone, of some of the people that you might actually be able to meet and that you could benefit from, both of you. It's a reciprocal thing in the future. First up is Mr. Neil Mackay, who has obviously hosted this event. And the reason why I've included here is because it's my first ever presentation type. And this is something that I do want to do. Yet, if I hadn't had that connection with Neil prior, I probably wouldn't have been given this opportunity. But I have been given because we've connected beforehand, we know each other now, and so this is how it works.
We'll be right back.
Join pilot and adventurer Fernando Pino as he takes you on journeys to discover exciting destinations across the UK and Europe. You'll fly with him to hidden gems and experience local culture, from bustling streets to serene hideaways and the best places to eat, sleep, and play. Travel Plans is more than a podcast. It's your ticket to exploring the world and its history with a friend. In this episode, we are flying to discover a beachside paradise perfect for the whole family. Discover golden sands, activities galore, and even free childcare so you get your own break too. Why am I still here?
Secondly, when I started out, I thought there were no podcasts in Saigon. I perhaps foolishly didn't do that much research. One day I just typed in Saigon podcast and Creators in Saigon podcast popped up. And I believe it was Tracy. When I look back, somebody, so I'm going to assume it's Tracy, messaged me saying, our host Dana knows, or our founder Dana knows certain tips that you were asking. Get in touch. I did. She helped me out, which I was really impressed by. I had this impression that if I asked another podcast for help, they might just say, do it yourself. Don't know why, that was just my assumption. Couldn't have been further from the truth. Both the examples, Neil and Tracy, Dana, Nicholas that I mentioned, have all been really helpful in my journey so far. And if you have an interest in music, which I do, and my old job in Manchester was working behind the scenes for a music production magazine. So I would interview people who did the lighting, the rigging, the sound. But I always wanted to interview the artists. I guess that's maybe what every aspiring music journalist wants to do. And so here in Vietnam, I thought, let's dive in and interview the bands. My first band and the first segment of Cold World Connor, where we drink beer with a group and have conversations, was Coastal Connection back in April. And I've maintained contact with all of those guys since interviewed Jeremy again about 2 weeks ago. He's helped me out with equipment such as microphones, etc. And the track that I have now at the start and end of the podcast was designed by Holland, who decided to start getting into that realm during lockdown, messaged me and said, would you like a podcast track? I thought, absolutely. So that was a result of the previous chat we'd had back in April. Another friend of mine, actually, Nick, he has given me a lot of interviews. He popped up one day and said, hey, listen to most of your episodes. Love the vibe. Would you be interested in speaking to somebody who has served in the military, somebody who has been an active activist in Washington, D.C., or somebody who has become quite advanced in their spiritual practice? And my innate curiosity said, yes, absolutely, to more. And he's since really impressed me where daily almost daily, he'll message me and say, hey, I've got a new guest for you. But I think, brilliant, this is exactly what I wanted. So he will sometimes jump on for co-hosting duties, which is also nice as a novelty. I always try to mix it up where, for example, I was just going to do comeback from adversity to begin with, then realized it's important to share those stories, but let's also have some fun. Let's also balance it with some lighthearted versus the dark stuff. So I changed to that. I brought in groups because it was a challenge, and I thought a co-host would provide a different challenge. So Nick filled that role for me. Several colleagues here. Episode 40, Isabel, 50, Ridley, 24, Toro. People that you'd see in the office and you'd have some kind of connection with, you'd have friendly conversation, etc. But you wouldn't connect perhaps too deeply. But since then, I've become good friends with all of them, and they've all shared different stories which have really helped me in my journey, especially how they've all lived in the UK, fairly similar backgrounds in many different ways to the two on the left, the north, etc. So it's great to have that connection from people that you work with that you, again, wouldn't really get in the office. And I suppose some bizarre ones that I would never have predicted when I started the pod. For example, if you'd have said to me, you could interview friends or family members, I'd say great. But these people I wouldn't. Like, this example is a lady builder, and that photo is me at 15, and it's excruciating bad, I'm aware, but I was 15, so please forgive. And we met on holiday 8 years ago. And obviously, when you meet someone on holiday, you don't keep in touch. I didn't assume so. I felt like it's just hey, nice to meet you, and then you leave after that week. And I hadn't got a message in about 6 years or something crazy to the point where I forgot it existed. She popped up, loved the podcast, and wanted to be a guest. I said, absolutely. And so once I'm back in Europe, in Norway, hopefully a dinner's on the cards. And she's also a Norwegian. Spoke about that for a while, and hope she's probably the one who actually likes him now. But it was still a great conversation back when we had it in April, I believe. Next is a friend, Will Saxton, and we got to, I suppose, study our evolution. Where back the picture on the left, again, not great, when we were 18, 19 and students basically engaging in student behavior, we never thought that 3 years later he would become a dad, age 23. And I thought, how do you make that transition? I turned 24 recently, and I cannot imagine having a child. So to have him go from that kind of, partying aspect that he did with me to then becoming a dad was great to explore on the podcast. What's it like being a your father? What help do you get? What things are you not aware of? He described that you would, you get some kind of supervision, but largely you go home with the child and that's it. And that kind of struck me that, that must be pretty daunting. And also, yeah, I am aware that I hadn't held a baby in about a long, long time. So that's why my baby holding skills are quite awkward on the right. Please forgive. And these are some impossible guests. And the reason I say impossible is because I always assumed if someone had a blue tick next to their name on Instagram or they were verified, that you just couldn't reach them. I just thought, no, like people with any kind of public profile won't come on your show. So I accepted that initially. And then after a month thought, well, everyone's normal. Why don't I just try this? So here's some examples that have been real, I suppose, highlights, because if you'd have told me when I started this podcasting journey that I interviewed these people, I would have probably laughed. So to actually get them was great. My favorite podcast was a show called London Real. When I was coming to the end of uni and working in Manchester, I just devoured every single episode. Went back to the archives from 2011-12 and just had them. He was writing down the messages. I thought, wow, like, these people are incredible. Like some of the names I mentioned here, Sadhguru, George Peterson, Dan Parney. There are so many more. And 3 guests who have appeared on here, not quite in that realm, but they have appeared on the show. So it's great when you listen to your favorite podcast, the one that you've followed almost religiously, and then some of those guests speak to you. It's a weird moment. I got used to it, I suppose, but the first couple of ones I thought, wow, this is brilliant. This is, I suppose, why I started. Another podcast that has really benefited me in the last year is called the High Performance Podcast. It's with a professor and a football presenter from the UK who I'm sure Neil will be familiar with. Damien, again, I just thought, why not try it? I sent him a message. I said, hey, I love your podcast. Would you, if you have any time, would you give up an hour or so to come on? I'd really appreciate it. I've used your lessons in my own life, etc. Came on and was everything I hoped for. You know, when you listen to a podcast host week in, week out, coming out with great nuggets of wisdom, you hope that in real life they'd carry that same thing and it's not just a gimmick. And can't speak highly enough of Damien. Indeed was. Another guest was the right-hand man for Tony Blair, in case anyone wasn't familiar, but from 97 to 2003. And what really struck me about this character is that he had very bad mental health problems and a huge mental breakdown in 1986, but still worked at the top of government. And when I first discovered who he really was in about 2018, I thought, yeah, this is fascinating. So I listened to so many interviews with him and thought, yeah, I'd love to actually interview him one day just to see what it's like. And then again, just thought, I think it was January. Yeah, it was January. I was on a flight to Hanoi, listening to a podcast with Alistair Campbell, and thought, yeah, it'd be great to have him on. I'm starting a podcast next week. I'll send him a message. Sent him a message on Instagram. He said yes. And then we did the interview the following month, which again, I thought, oh, this can happen. And it's not that difficult. I didn't need to go through an agent. I didn't need to pay. I didn't need to give him a huge list why. I didn't need to beg. He just said yes. I thought, this wasn't that difficult. This is another obstacle down. And I guess it went to show that you can get people that you wouldn't expect. And the final example, one of my favorite musicians when I was 10 years old, so obviously a while ago, but again, like, has a song that you and your school friends are all obsessed with at that young age. And you think, okay, he's not done anything in 10 years. I'd had a few beers with some roommates at this point who were just playing old songs. And I thought, why not see if he wants to do a pod? Fired off a message, didn't think anything else of it. And 3 months later, got a reply saying, yes, let's do it. I was like, let's do it. So we did. And again, it was another moment that brought me back to when I was 11, 12. And if you'd have said at that point that I'd be doing these interviews, I would have thought, that's quite good go. I'd quite enjoy doing that in my future. So that was, again, a great, I suppose, highlight and a reason that things that you would put as a barrier for podcasting don't actually exist. If you were to slide and say Beyonce's DMs tomorrow, you probably would not get a reply, granted, but there are a lot more people willing to speak to you than you would believe, is the underlying message here. And just as I suppose, a trivial example, it makes nights out more fun. Both of these instances were on separate occasions, one in Saigon, one if we got holiday. And both these ladies I got talking to, we were talking about a variety of topics, and I said, I promise you we'll do a podcast appearance. We're like, yeah. And almost hungover that very next day, for me, on the right, we just met up in a coffee shop, had hair of the dog, and got on with it again, which was, again, a weird kind of connection when you go on holiday, but it's fun, I suppose. I do like to do a serious interview where I'll do my research and we'll do it back and forth. But again, sometimes it can be just a fun, let's do a pod, see where we go type setup. Like, I still try to embrace the spontaneity. I think that it should be fun. Being too rigid might take away the initial reasons why we started podcasting. And when I look at, the ones who really seem to enjoy it, such as Joe Rogan, True Geordie, Lewis House, they seem to have a lot of fun. So I tried to bring that to some of my podcasts as well. And another thing for Saigon, and I just noted down some brief examples here because if I went on, it would go on for a long, long time. But these are a few that came to mind. Everybody knows everybody. So once you get that first interview or that first say 3 or 4, you then realize this person will know somebody else who will come on. Well, some examples I've put down here. One is Trent, who I messaged and realized to interview, had worked with Arena, who had also been the creators of the Saigon team, creators in Saigon, Vietnam. There's a chap, David, who we did an interview. He said, would you like to interview my girlfriend, Trisha? I said, yes. She said, would you like to interview my housemate, Elsa? I said, yes. Elsa had already been on Neil's podcast. I thought, this is just such a connection. Everything is together like a web. Saigon is a great place to be doing this. So again, Saigon, everyone knows everyone. Guests are, I don't say easy to come by, but you can definitely go for it if you really just look for it. And I guess what I've learned then, my main lessons are everybody does have a story and a lesson, even people that you wouldn't expect. The example I mentioned earlier was Philip McKernan, be alone with your thoughts. Is it nothing else? No external distraction. That also hit me. A lot of guests come out with similar themes, such as don't take anything personally. Advice is merely just somebody else's conditioned programming from birth and influences. It doesn't reflect on you. Do not be affected by it too negatively. Again, the importance of small behavioral changes. A lot of the times, if guests have done really interesting, inspiring things, such as Jabel, who has managed 50 restaurants, or somebody else who has created 5 different businesses, I think I almost used to think they had a superpower. They just had something I didn't. And whenever I ask the question, often the answer comes back, I made sure that I got all the little things right consistently. Consistency and discipline are the key areas. So I'll take that thing. Maybe I can actually do something. Maybe it's not just, special talents that others have. So it was certainly a key lesson. And I think what I have learned I'd say most importantly, is that people enjoy the opportunity to feel listened to. Whenever I've done a podcast being interviewed, I like the fact that people are actually taking notes, paying attention to what you're saying. It's such an underrated skill, I think, especially nowadays when people fight for attention, etc. On the podcast, you're giving a guest like your time and attention, and they really enjoy it and appreciate it. And you see in the interactions you have after that just how much. And also you can make a difference. A few times, and I won't go into too much detail, but I will do an interview on a certain topic, quite a slightly taboo area. And some of the messages I receive afterwards, I think, wow, like I can get sometimes occasionally overwhelmed just by how personal, how frank, and how raw the messages are of what they thought when they heard this because it happened to them or their friend, etc. But I think, wow, even if one person hears this, it can make a difference. Just knowing that makes podcasting so much more rewarding and valuable. So I suppose I've given you the origins, my highlights, what I think, and a key question then, how do you get started? And the one thing that was the key for me and was the key for many, this might differ, but the one message that I would give based on my experiences, just do it. Just start and begin, because that really is, for me, the toughest bit. I go back to what I said at the beginning of this presentation, that I created so many obstacles in my mind, so many mountains that I had to reach. And then I realized if I had just started, then all of this would have been avoided, all that stress and worry and procrastination. Just starting is the key. Even if you only have a phone and Zoom, even if you only have your friends, for example, like 3 guests, you've got 3 episodes. Momentum builds off that. You have something tangible. And when you reach out to people who you really want to interview, people you want to speak to, pick their brains, people you admire, if you have 3 or 4 episodes or more that actually show that you've done something, they're much more likely to do it because they can listen, they can know if you're real, if you're authentic, what they can gain from it, what you thought can be beneficial for third parties. So I think starting really is the one to go for. Once you start, then there are a host of factors that you can consider. I guess the name, the key topic, like the underlying theme, that has to obviously be in consideration, because often if I ask someone, hey, would you like to come on my podcast? Their first question, what is it about? And you can't really, well, you can, I guess, but I'm not sure how it would work if you said anything. So I feel like it's too vague. It's nice to specify one theme or one target area, such as back from adversities, self-development, creators, or a fun name like 7 million bikes. When you think like 7 million bikes, like it's something original, and that's the name of the topic. And then I suppose think of the people who you would really like to interview. So I guess it can be a fun exercise. Take out pen and paper. They can be colleagues, friends, celebrities, anyone really. Think, who would you really like to have this conversation with? And you can write these down, write down perhaps top 3 or top 5. And if they all have similar traits or similar experiences, backgrounds, then you'll often get an overview of who you really should be going towards. And then I guess think of the vibe. Are you going to be more of a talker or a listener? Is it a chat show? Is it a formal interview? You can experiment, I suppose. Then you don't have to think of the answer straight away, but or actually implement them. But certainly think of them, perhaps write them down. It can't do you any harm to have some sort of planning system just for when you really build momentum on your podcast. And also going back to, I believe it was Louis at the beginning of this presentation. Why are you doing it? What is, your core reason? What is your purpose for actually starting it? Is it for your business, your social media strategy, connecting online, self-promotion? Is it to share some stories? Is it to get together and share some stories, tips from certain experiences or certain themes that you've gone through, such as traveling abroad, expats? That's one that I've heard a few times. I think is a good one. Women's hormonal health, again, a key theme, sharing experiences, raising awareness. Mental health, again, a great one. They can be to raise awareness of a cause you're passionate about. This can be related to almost anything. I'm just going to name, Black Lives Matters off the top of my head, perhaps. Anything else, I guess, you can put there. And the final reason I have here is for fun. If you are doing the podcast and someone asks you, why do you do this? For fun is a very, very legitimate answer. This should be fun. You should be really enjoying it. If it's just a hobby, that is fine. Like, you don't have to be Joe Rogan. You don't have to make a huge studio. You can sometimes just do it literally because you enjoy having a chat with people. Get together, have a few beers, see what you do. And in 3 or 4 years, perhaps, or longer or shorter, you can always go to that episode on Spotify and meet up again with those guys or girls that you've chatted to and say, oh, yeah, do you remember when we said this, etc. All of the reasons that I've detailed here, I think about it. I really do. I just think to have some kind of idea can help you perhaps avoid brain fog or confusion when starting your journey. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, surprisingly, and this was the bit that really shocked me because I thought, no way is a phone going to contain audio that's anywhere near acceptable for a podcast, because I thought a podcast was, I suppose, something that of the elite standard. I thought it couldn't just be a voice recording. It works now. It's not the best, of course. Obviously, professional podcasters will have studios, microphones, etc. But if you're just beginning it, use the phone. Use the phone and maybe get the experience from actually interviewing people, maybe building vibe, building audience. That can probably be more important than the equipment. I think the phrase in football is all the gear, no idea. That was my initial plan to, excuse me, almost become a YouTuber, have all the equipment, but not actually know what my topic was, what I would talk about, how I would arrange guests. And I think that's more important. Now, this is my view. I wouldn't necessarily say this is the same for everybody. It's just what I've found is it's benefited me a lot in my journey so far. And in terms of software, I was very surprised how simple it was. This is probably the most basic tool. I think there are more advanced ones, but Anchor distributes to all streaming platforms. That is Spotify, Apple, Google, etc. And if we rewind to probably this time last year, I had no idea that you could get a podcast to all of these platforms. I thought you had to only have it on Spotify or only Google or only Apple or YouTube. I genuinely had no idea how it worked. And what also surprised me is that how quick it was. I had a thought that because I had some friends who were musicians and they would release their music on Spotify, which I believe is a 2-week limit, I'd be able to tell more. I thought it would be the same with podcasting. But with Anchor, what I found is if I don't edit it, which at the beginning I didn't, I can just upload it, type out the bio, such as come back, my guest today is David, etc. Publish, and within 10 minutes, it's on Spotify. Twitch with 10 minutes? Is that all it takes? Wow. I thought it was a hugely long, drawn-out process, but it really is a lot more simple than I expected or anticipated. And then how to find guests for your show. As I mentioned earlier, people you actually know would surprise you, like the examples of Fielder and Will. Like when, you're perhaps thinking of your vibe, think of somebody, perhaps a friend or an acquaintance, a friend you maybe know to a decent level, or an old friend that you've lost touch with. You might think, they would be perfect. They told me a story about X that would really suit this vibe. Get in touch and see if they're interested. Facebook groups. I spoke to Jeremy recently from Southgate, Vietnam. He posted on the Musicians Network page on Facebook, I'm doing a podcast on music. Who would like to come on? Overwhelmed. And it made sense. I've had it before where I've put in groups and people have flooded in, and I think, oh yeah, people do enjoy the opportunity to talk about their brand, themselves, what they're up to. People will respond, especially in Saigon where thousands of people in these groups. Put your post in there. Hey, I'm doing a podcast on this. Who would like to come? It's highly likely you will get a response, at least one or two. So I would really encourage that. Again, friends of friends, help what I mentioned earlier, everybody in Saigon, knowing everybody, that can be used to your advantage. You can speak to a guest about a certain topic. They can say, oh, I know X who would be a great fit. I'll put you in touch. Hey, presto, another guest pops up. And going back to the London Real and Kevin Rudolph examples, fire off emails. Even if you think they'll never reply in a million years, fire it off. Just send an Instagram, slide into the DMs, go through an email, type to them on Twitter. Think of something like it might happen. And you don't know if you don't try. So if you see someone and think they would be a great interview, just give it a try. I think that's all you can do. And coming to the end of the presentation, my personal tips, and this is just me. This is just what I found and I think would benefit people starting out in their podcasting journey, and I think I've learned. The first one, as I said, is to really listen. And I'm not always the best at this. Sometimes my mind can wander, but I am getting better now at realizing that I should just be present with this guest. I've read the books on, say, present moment, etc. You have to be present with the guest, listen to what they're saying, direct the conversation in that manner, and really pay them due attention. It's very important, actually, for the flow of the conversation. That's why I put it number one. And I guess number two is be authentic. For example, I would class myself as fairly introverted and not the most gariest character. I'm not, I don't take over large groups of people, etc. So I think that reflects on the show where I'll be more of a listener, I'll observe, I'll give some quiet reflection rather than me trying to be like a Joe Rogan or a comedian and trying to take over with jokes that nobody will laugh at because it's not my style. I think both I'm trying to copy, say, a podcast figure in the public domain. I think people can smell a rat. So I say just be yourself and see where it goes. Embracing failure and don't expect perfection. Things will go wrong, especially when you begin. Once you listen back, almost everybody, I would say everybody actually, hates the sound of their own voice on record. Like you'll think, oh, do I sound like that? Do I have to release that? That sounds dreadful. We'll probably go through those challenges. I remember the first 3 or 4, I'd think, oh, that sounds dreadful. It sounds like I've only done 3 of these. Then it hit me. That's exactly it. I've only done 3. So I'd not sound like, I've mentioned again, Joe Rogan, because he's done 1,000, I've done 3. So the more you do something, the better you will be. So just embrace that at the start and do the very best that you can, given the conditioning you have at that moment. I'll only briefly touch upon this because I don't want to ramble or get too controversial, but having a nuanced, balanced conversation is important in this day and age. In a lot of areas where I personally believe it's been lost, I believe that people don't like to have, just a balanced debate or a discussion, a dialogue about an issue. It has to be tribal. It has to be a row, especially on social media. A podcast is a platform to really delve into that issue with somebody. And you don't necessarily have to agree with them, but you can see it from their point of view. And I think that a podcasting platform is key for that. So can make a difference in that regard. And I guess the final thing, I look at Saigon very differently since I started podcasting, where I was here for a year and 3 months, I'd say, before I started it. And I've been doing it now then for just a year. And things have changed so much in terms of the opportunities I get, the people I get to speak to, the lessons that I've learned. The thing I realized was they've always been there. I just wasn't in the place, like mentally or physically, to actually get those interviews or get those lessons, because I wasn't actually directing my attention towards them. I was directing my attention to bullshit, basically, and not actually doing something tangible or creative for myself. So once you get into this role where you can have these connections with people and you can understand these insights, Saigon becomes that little bit better. And whether you're here for another 3 months, another 3 years or longer, it can always just be a benefit. Final thing, I'll say it again because I really have found this. The first step is the hardest. I think it's true. I really think just actually getting it done, getting it out there on Spotify is the trickiest. Once it's there, a huge obstacle is gone. You almost, well, I'm speaking for myself. I feel it's a huge obstacle. Podcast, it's huge. It's going on Spotify. People will hear my voice. It might get shared. I have to promote it, etc. And then once I published it, all of that went. And now it feels very normal, where I remember when I did my first ever podcast, I was interviewed and I put it on Facebook. People were, oh my God, you did a podcast. And I thought, yeah, I actually did a podcast. This is crazy. And now it's very normal day. I do podcasts, as we said, quite regularly now. So yeah, all as a result of just starting. I think it just, once you start, it flows from there. You can pick up a book. I think it's a book. Like when you go traveling to one country or two and you want to go to them all. I was a bit like that with podcasting. I interviewed my first guest, Casey, and after that, I became obsessed. At points, probably a little too obsessed, where I was, as we mentioned, publishing 5 a day. And then I've just toned it down and just realized 1 a day is enough, 2 at very max. But again, you do get the momentum from just actually getting it done. I guess I do have to plug the podcast whilst here. So I'll just mention briefly where you can access it. I do most of the promotion via Instagram, which is just hashtags and letting you know who's been interviewed and what they've been up to. To actually find it on Spotify, etc., the links are on my social media platforms. But if you just want to type it in, people have had issues with this because comeback is quite a common word. There are quite a few podcasts with that name. Just type in my name, comeback Conor Kelly, and it should come up on all streaming platforms. I've said for about 2 months that I'm going to make my website, and I've been dossing about with it, to be honest with you. But I've recently had, for say, an accountability circle. So they're going to basically kick my backside into actually doing it. So this will be up very soon, which is another way of accessing. I guess to conclude, thank you very much for listening, and thank you to Neil for giving me this chance. And any questions?
Oh, thank you so much, Conor. Guys, give a big round of applause there for Conor. That was really good. Really enjoyed that. So many good tips. Great to hear your story as well. I really connected with what you said about the connection you get with guests has probably been my favorite part of podcasting. What you said about, you could normally only have those conversations at the end of the night or under the stars. And it's really amazing when you have, so you talked about even interviewing friends. My first episodes were interviewing friends, and I've still never had a deeper chat with him than I did that 1 hour that we just sat down and the stories he shared with me. And so even my guests today are just like, I can't believe we're sitting and talking about this and you're sharing this. And you don't keep in touch with everyone, but you make acquaintances, you make good friends. And for me, that's one of the most amazing things. So yeah, I really connected with that. So yeah, let's open it up. Who's got some questions for Conor?
Well, I definitely came here as someone who hasn't hosted a podcast before, but has been on a few. So, I definitely appreciate your breakdown of it. I guess one of the things I was thinking about is like, how do you pick out your questions and how do you weigh out your judgment for what's, tactful and what might be too intrusive?
That's a good question. Initially, I will have done some kind of research most of the time, probably 90 to 95%. And that is usually just their social media profile. And with that, if they say or speak about an issue that might be slightly intrusive, I will say at the start, okay, this is what I saw on your social media. Would you be comfortable discussing? If they say yes, we discuss. If they say no, we don't. And I also give a brief overview just before we begin. So I'll say, hey, David, we're going to discuss the work, background, Vietnam, challenges, any advice. And I'll go through that and say, is that okay? They say yes. I then say, it will go freestyle. And if there's anything I ask you that you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to. Just say, I'd rather not, I'm going to move on. And people generally understand that. There's only been one or two in 260 that have said, oh, I don't want to talk about that. And I say, okay, I edit that bit out and move on. So I'm pretty clear from the outset exactly what is going to happen. And with that, I suppose, I think the guest will know. I think when somebody often is trying to, I guess, be nosy or go too personal, but you also know when they're asking just out of interest. And so far, I think I've given off that vibe that it's just curiosity. But it hasn't been a huge issue. Well, that's how I go about it, basically, just to answer your question, just to be transparent from the off.
Thank you. No, it sounds like consent prior to recording plays a big role in that. And that was something that definitely is an interesting point to hear. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
And to add as well, and consent is completely correct. And you can do that within the podcast as well by just saying, oh, if you're comfortable about talking about this. And then I'm similar to Conor. I think I've maybe only had 2 occasions where they were like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. And then kind of had to edit it out. But that's just because it was something about their family that they mentioned. And they're like, oh, I don't want to mention that. So it doesn't come up too often. But yeah, I think it is preempting. It helps. So we got Trent, who's going to be wanting to start a podcast, Milan, who's going to produce a podcast, Louis, who's making one with me, and then Gareth. I'm not too sure of your podcasting interest. What do you guys, have you got any feedback on Conor's presentation or anything else that you'd like to know or clarify on?
I'll jump in. Can you guys hear me? You guys are frozen on your side.
Yeah.
Am I frozen too?
No, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Well, first off, nice to meet you all. I don't believe we've had a chance to meet outside tonight. But I was just going to say, Neil, your friend Fiona Thompson recommended I check out this event. Thank you for having me. And Conor, I know we worked together, but we never really had the chance to properly meet. But I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I definitely feel motivated coming out of tonight to explore something like a podcast. And so, yeah, I just had an easy question for you. I was just curious, who's your next guest? Who do you have lined up for you? Who are you excited to kind of chat with you in the near future?
Yeah. Tomorrow I have 2 plans. One is a guy from Finland who's moved over from Hanoi, and he took the Tony Robbins course. So we're basically going to, I believe it's the Fire Walk. I think Neil mentioned that where we did our podcast episode. I think he did quite, I need to really research this actually. So thank you for reminding me. He did something related to that with Tony Robbins. So we'll ask about that. And it's lovely. A French lady who is involved in 3 different charities. So what I need to do is really work out exactly what she's up to, what she's doing, and see where it goes. And yeah, to be honest, I've taken the weekend off because I just want to relax come Halloween. Well, after that, I think in November, I'm going to try and get 1 a day on average, but there's no one really in mind right now except for that. There are some guests I've had on previously that will come back. But yeah, that's the gist, I guess, for now. There's going to be a variety, and you yourself are welcome. We can ever arrange that. So, yeah.
Definitely appreciate that. I did actually had a follow-up question, if you don't mind. You mentioned Anchor in terms of your editing software. in terms of how long it takes to edit a podcast, just in terms of outside of the actual chat, how long does it take to edit, go through it?
Yeah, sure. It depends because my time limit is usually fluctuates. So I'd say the average is about 40 minutes. So if it is a full set podcast, to edit that, I would say it's around same time, maybe 40 minutes, because I'll keep going back and should I cut out, say, 3.60 or 3.17? So I guess it does depend on it, but probably the same amount of length it is, the same amount of time to edit, or slightly more. So I'd say around 15 minutes more than the actual time is, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Cool.
It's a good question. Can I add to that as well? So I'm writing a blog post right now, which will come out soon, and this one of the topics I'm going to talk about. And it really varies. So I recently interviewed like a woman who does the Vietnamese Boat People podcast, and she makes like a storytelling format podcast. And for half an hour of podcast, it takes her about 60 hours of editing. Because she's turning it into a story, so it's like taking bits and having a narration and putting it all together and narrating it. So that's, they can take that long. In the beginning, I would say it probably took me like maybe 2-3 hours per 1 hour. So about 1-3 ratio. That's come down a lot now, thanks to new technologies and not being as pedantic as I was in the beginning. So it can vary. From, I think in the beginning, Connor, you just automatically uploaded it, right? So you had zero editing time, right?
Yeah, that was the first thing. I thought, as I mentioned, just get them.
Yeah, you were mentioning that, right?
Then I realized, you have to edit it. Okay.
So it's really up to you what you want to do. But sometimes you can get like, if you're talking about editing out 1 second, and I've been there before where I'm like trying to stitch together this tiny bit, and then I've made so many stitches, I've forgotten where I was, and then I'm like, I have to undo it all and start again. It can be the most fun and the most frustrating part of making a podcast, I think.
Yeah, I've been there.
Milan or Trent, or Louis as well. And I would recommend Louis for a guest on your podcast, Connor. He'd have a lot of good stories to share.
Thanks. I would be into it.
Just don't ask him about his internet connection because he'll get angry.
Okay. I'll make sure just to avoid that one.
Oh, Louis, we can't hear you.
Yeah, this will work.
There we go, General.
I'm telling you, it's the people problem, right, Neil?
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing wrong with it. It was just not facing in my in the direction of my voice. And I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, right? Yeah, I just couldn't help but noticing some common themes that you put in. Just the 3 that I've done with Neil so far. And also just hearing some of the tips that he was prepping me and my partner Wilfro with is that I was kind of struck by that. I don't know if it was because I didn't expect it or I thought that we were all pretty unique, but in a way we're not. Because we're all about a human story, right? And human stories don't really change. It's just the way of delivering it, right? And it's just the topics will change, but human stories are human stories. And, it just reminded me that we wanted it to be a human story, right? If Neil remembers, right, we talked quite a bit about sort of, this is coming from our, very personal experiences as IT professionals in the trenches. And that's sort of, we wanted that to come through and not be just another marketing talking head, because we're not. We started out our careers literally under people's desks, right? We were IT help desk people under people's desks, plugging things, taking things apart, right? We were the IT crowd before there was the IT crowd. Right. So, all right. And, I think people need to understand that. And so far, right, Neil, I mean, the 3 that we've done, even though it's a podcast about tech, all we've talked about is people in history a lot, right? But tech kind of glues in the stories a bit, right? This is what brings us together. But you would think ostensibly a topic about digital and technology and that we'd be talking a lot of geek
Programming language and
programming,
things like that.
yeah, really technical stuff, and we haven't. Even the guests that we've had, except for Dennis, but then it's he's on a different radio frequency than us. But we still manage to find it's about people, right? And I think that's really great, Connor, to see that. You just kind of reinforcing that. I think our initial sort of impression about this is the right one, right? And I think that's going to help us build a more successful podcast that's going to generate more interest and hopefully be more helpful, right? Not just be a marketing driver for business consulting, but at the end of the day, we want to be helpful to people wherever they are. So yeah, I appreciate that sharing.
Yeah, I'd like to. Sorry if I cut you off, Neil.
No, I was going to say thanks, Louis.
I'd like to echo, everyone who's spoken already and saying thank you, Connor, for, sharing these things, because I've considered a podcast for years. I've written jokes about it, but just the getting started part, what service do I choose? How do I get it out there? How do I record it? All of these things that would get overwhelming before I even researched them. So you answered a lot of things that I've wondered about for a long time. And as a comedian, a genuine connection matters to me. And you don't always know whether or not you're getting that with comedians. So being able to talk in that kind of format has, it sounds appealing to me, from hearing what you said about it. So I really appreciate you, bringing out your experience with it and passion for it. So thank you.
Yeah, so I studied sports science, and one of my favorite kind of concepts I learned from that was a concept that affects elite level athletes called paralysis by analysis. And if you basically, as you can understand from the concept, if you spend too much time analyzing stuff, you paralyze yourself. And so that can creep into anything, not just elite level sports, but you can, obviously, like Conor was saying, if you spend so much time thinking about it, you end up becoming paralyzed and don't do it. But it is the most difficult step, is to just do it. So, I like that as well.
Yeah.
You worry about it being, you want it to be perfect. You think, it has to be amazing. It has to be best. But if you're in the early stages, it just won't be. And once I realized that, I didn't want to be lazy, but I thought that would benefit me more than this perfectionist mindset, which just doesn't exist. So yeah, that's why I went for this just do it mindset. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Thanks for listening to this episode of 7 Million Bikes, a Vietnam podcast. We hope you enjoy hearing our guest stories. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the show and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Thank you so much to our producer, Lewis Wright, for making sure the show sounds as good as possible for you. And also a big thanks to the 7 Million Bikes community members and everyone who supports us. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you can join the community today. The link is in the description and you'll get free event tickets, free 7 Million Bikes face mask and invites to special member events. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and I'm still ashamed to say this, TikTok. Most of all, if you can, please donate to Saigon Children's Charity or Blue Dragons Children Foundation's COVID appeals. Remember, we have 6 seasons of stories to share with you, so check them out if you haven't already, and we hope you can listen to future episodes too, so you can laugh, connect, and discover. Cheers! I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're like me, you may use your laptop at places where you have to use public Wi-Fi. This opens you up to digital snoopers. It's a massive problem. It can be your internet service provider, or you know who, looking at what you do online, or a cyber criminal trying to steal your bank passwords or credit card info, or even a hacker at the next table trying to steal your sensitive data. These days, it is vital that you keep your data safe. NordVPN keeps all of these snoopers away. It makes your internet activity private, protects you from accessing dangerous websites that are phishing for your data, and lets you enjoy your favorite content securely, even while away from home. And it's easy to use, even I could use it. I've actually been using NordVPN for years now here in Vietnam, and I'm excited to be an affiliate partner with them. I've used NordVPN to watch Netflix, BBC, Disney Plus with ease, and I also know that my information and data are safe from prying eyes, whoever they may be. Join now and you'll get 68% off and 3 months free when you go to my link, nordvpn.com/SMB. Just again, for those hard of hearing, nordvpn.com/SMB. The link is also in the show notes. I know nobody checks them out, but go check that out and you can get the link from wherever you are listening to this podcast. As an affiliate partner, it also means that I will get a small commission when you sign up, but at no extra cost to you. So not only will you be getting a great deal through 7 Million Bikes, you get a great VPN and you'll be supporting 7 Million Bikes podcast. Stay safe online and enjoy the shows you love. Any questions, just let me know. You know how to get in touch with me. And thanks for listening to this show. Cheers.